Somebody believes God is a fence. Is their right to believe in
It's
it?
their right to believe it.
They have a soul.
I didn't. I want you to explain to me what a spirit is. What's your definition of a spirit?
My question is to you, do you accept his position to say God is divided
I'm
into
not
three?
talking about his position.
That's my question.
What if somebody had that position though?
What do you think?
What about?
That's their right to believe that.
But would that be correct to say God is 1/3
No, it's
and
their
1/3
right
and
to
1/3?
believe it. I never said it was correct or incorrect. I said it's their right to believe it.
So if somebody believes God is a fence, is their right to believe in
It's
it?
their right to believe it.
And
yes,
you let
exactly.
them believe in it.
Well, it's not my choice. It's their choice.
What
They're a
is-
separate person than me.
Do you accept,
At
do you
what
accept because
point
it's wrong?
do you interject and interfere?
I don't. That's their business.
What if the belief that somebody has is going to harm others? Would you then stop them or interject or interfere in some way or another?
If the belief that someone has...
Somebody believes white people are the devil,
Yeah, okay.
and let's get rid of the white people from planet Earth. If they had such a belief system, would you interfere with this belief system of those people who believe in that?
that's wrong.
Interject or try to say, no, you can't have a belief system like that because it will harm others?
That's not... if they take action on it and actually do something...
Right, that's what I'm saying. At what point do
They
you
took action.
get involved?
Yeah,
Remember you said,
I would
I don't
get
care.
involved. Yeah.
So
In
at
other
what
words, that's what I'm saying. If somebody tried to kill me, I would try and stop them killing me.
Right.
Yeah.
So at what point do you think one should get involved about what their purpose is here in this life? And people say, it doesn't matter if you believe in that and you die, because what if they all are going to end up in hell with the wrong belief? Would you not
There
care?
is no hell.
No, when you say what is the no hell, this is all linked with the belief
Can
in
you tell
God.
me if there's a hell?
This is linked with the belief in God.
Can you tell
Yes.
me if there... Oh, you can?
We can, yes.
How do you know?
We have
You
no...
have not yet died. How do you know there's a hell?
Are you saying the only way we can know things...
How can you prove to me there's a hell?
I am. Just about to.
How?
Yeah, are you interested?
It's actually impossible.
If you allow me to...
Have you already been dead?
If you allow me to explain to
Answer
you...
my question first. Have you already been dead?
No.
Well, then you can't tell me whether there's a hell or not. You can't.
I will tell you how you can know about the existence of things even without being there.
For example,
Are you interested to know?
have you been listen,
Okay,
listen,
okay.
have you been to the Caribbean before? No. Okay. How do you believe there is Caribbean such area there exists?
How do I believe?
How do you believe
Yeah.
it?
Because I know it's there.
How do you know it's there? You haven't been there.
You've never been there.
I talk to people who've been there.
You've talked, so that means the way you believe in something's existence is by getting information from people that you trust.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Got you, right? So now you, as you realize now, because you're an intelligent person, I'm sure he's very intelligent, there's various ways we can know things. One is from trustworthy source,
Yeah.
witnesses who are trustworthy.
Okay, just according to your argument there, what's your trustworthy source that hell exists?
Sure. So if we have...
Tell me what the trustworthy
I am
source
about
is.
to.
He is answering.
But you're not answering me.
I am.
You're not
You
answering
didn't
me.
know him. Just let him answer.
Tell me how you know hell exists.
Okay, give him.
We have been told- I am
Give
been
him 2
told
seconds.
by a
Give him 2
trustworthy
minutes.
source
Then I will explain.
whose name is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is being already, agreed upon by the community of his people that he's trustworthy and is reliable. And he said that there is heaven and hell. And of course he gave evidence for what he is saying, that he received this knowledge from the one who created this universe.
Elaborate to you. For example, how we know a person is trustworthy.
Oh, hold on, no. I'm going to go back to my original argument. Did this guy you're talking about die, see the existence of hell, and come back alive again? To
Irrelevant. We just established that you don't need to die to know hell exists, just like you don't need to go to Caribbean to know Caribbean exists.
But how can you prove hell exists
Okay.
if you haven't died?
Have you seen the image of your brain?
Is hell on earth while people
I just
are
want to.
alive?
I just want to give you another example.
It's not answering the
Have
question.
you seen?
Is hell on earth
Have you
while
seen your
Well,
brain?
you have to die to know of its
There are
existence.
some
Let-
people
let-
who
let-
will
Would that be a
die.
logical
Listen,
argument?
No, because God can inspire you and reveal it to you. You can just go up and see things. I mean, God can do anything.
Have you seen your brains? Have you seen your brains? Well, I've seen mine because I had an MRI done at one point.
Oh, yeah, I've had an MRI done. Yeah.
Of your head?
Yeah.
Right. Have you seen the brain of your family, all of your family members?
No.
Do they have brains?
I would presume they do because they wouldn't be able to stay alive.
How are you going to be certain, without seeing the image of the brain itself with a scan, that they have a brain?
Because their heart wouldn't work. They wouldn't be alive.
So you're making other logical connections to your argument. You don't have to see the brain to know brain is there, but you can deduce from the function of the brain.
But there's
Please,
a difference.
my friend,
The brain is a
you
physical
are-
thing.
you
You're
are
talking
deducing.
about concept. Hell is a concept. There's
not
a
a con-
massive difference.
It's not a
You're
concept.
talking
It's
about
real, it's real.
abstract.
If you allow me
You're
to,
talking about
explain.
an abstract concept that you believe exists.
Okay.
When you talk about a brain, you're talking about a physical
We are talking-
entity.
we are talking
that
about the
people
existence
have
of
seen
things.
and touched.
we are talking
There's
about
a
the
massive difference.
we are talking
Maybe
about
you
the
don't
existence of
understand the
things.
difference between a concept. Maybe you don't understand the difference.
We need to go back to the basics.
It's a physical thing.
Okay.
Physical thing.
Do you have a spirit?
Huh?
Do you have a spirit?
But that depends on what you mean by the word spirit.
Okay, what do you mean by the word spirit? What do you
Now
define?
you tell me what the word spirit means to you first.
I want you to know, do you have a spirit? Yes or no? And then we'll elaborate more. Do you believe you have a spirit? You have a soul? You have a soul?
I want you to explain to me what a spirit is. What's your definition of a spirit?
Okay, the spirit of the soul, which is a creation of God that made it into our body in order to function our body. As soon as this soul leaves the body, then the body will not function. It will be dead. Yeah. So this is the spirit. This is the soul. Now here the question is to you, and they have, nowadays, even until nowadays, they couldn't discover what's the meaning of the soul. Until now, they couldn't get it. They put a cell, they put all the components of the cell, but still the cell is not alive because it doesn't have soul. So the soul, the things that makes things to function. So now here, is it a physical thing? They cannot say it's a physical thing.
like electricity.
Is it
Electricity.
even is not even is not energy
Energy.
because they have
Energy.
even is not energy. Even the soul is not energy. They couldn't describe it.
So you agree with these guys? You agree that hell exists?
No, before that, listen.
Oh, you know for sure.
Listen, brother.
Christians, I see Christians that way.
So my point is to you, to say something exists, as he mentioned to you, you don't need to necessarily have a physical thing for it or something that, a physical description for it to know that it exists. And you know, and I know that you believe there is a soul that you have, and you know that how your body functions because of the soul. As soon as the soul departs your body, you know you're gonna die. As simple as that. And this soul is not an energy, it's not something that cannot be measured. They don't have even a physical component, they don't know what it is. Yeah. So my point is to you, sir, that's one of the things. How we know something that is really exists is through few things. Firstly, a person who is trustworthy, someone who is knowledgeable about certain things, and then start describing certain things. Not just that he talked to us about prophecies of his time, prophecies that yet to come in the future, and all of them came as the sun, that you could see the sun. So he said this will happen in such and such, and it happened. And it happened before, when he was an illiterate person, is unable to have even to be exposed to the knowledge of the people before us, and yet he was describing things only was discovered recently. So how did he know about these things? For example, I will give you an example for you to know, for example, in the Quran. For example, 1400 years ago, what do you think, what is the deepest point any diver could die 1400 years ago? You know, you've been to the sea, yeah? You've been to a sea?
Oh, of course I have.
Okay. So what is the deepest point any diver could die 1400 years ago? Any diver.
How many meters?
Just give me, just whatever.
Without apparatus.
Without
because they didn't have
1400 years
I
ago.
don't know, maybe 60 meters, I don't know.
Why
is this relevant?
I will tell you why. Because God said in the Quran, I will tell you why this is relevant. God says in the Quran, those who are away from the guidance of God, they are like someone deep in the bottom of the ocean. Above him there is a wave, above the wave there is another wave. Above the sea.
You're losing me here. I don't know what you're talking about.
Again,
You're losing me.
He'll explain to you.
I'll explain to you.
No, but it's too long-winded. I don't have the time.
Listen. I'll explain to you.
Speed it up.
I will
He'll
explain
explain to you.
Just wait.
Yeah.
So
I'm not being rude. I genuinely don't have the
okay.
time.
Okay.
You don't have to.
Listen.
It's all right. Family's waiting.
Let me explain to you. Now,
I asked you what your definition of a spirit
okay,
was.
I will come to you to the point now here. So God says about in the Quran, for example, one verse in the Quran describing certain depth in the ocean. Someone who is away from the guidance of God, living in a pitch dark area in the bottom of the ocean. And at that time, the people used to appreciate and see the surface waves of the sea, but they never knew that there is deep in the bottom of the ocean, there is another wave, which they call the sea current, traveling in another direction. So when the sunlight comes, And if there is a cloudy weather, the 60% or 40% of the light will be reflected, and only 6% will go through. And the surface waves will break the light, and only half of it will go through. And there is another wave going in another direction. It will break the remains. And deep in the bottom of the ocean, there is no pitch dark. When was discovered? Only recently, when they have these submarines and all of these things, they discovered that there are some creatures living deep in the bottom of the ocean in the absence of light. How Muhammad 1400 years ago describing these details
In the Quran.
nowadays?
It was in the Quran. All these things that is
In the
covered now
Quran.
in the Quran.
How?
Maybe it was a good guess.
No.
There is, okay.
So many guesses.
Okay, fine.
Can't get so many guesses.
Another guess. Listen. Brother. Another guess. So good guess.
I predicted that Spurs would beat Man City yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
Right? That was a good guess.
Okay, good
I
guess.
won a few
Listen.
That was a good guess.
Another guess. Another guess. And now I will
I didn't know it was going to happen.
Listen.
It was a good guess.
Listen.
No, it describes it in detail.
Listen.
Describes it in
Another
detail.
guess. So God, for example, 1400 years ago, what do you think the people they know about the cosmology? What they know? What's their knowledge about cosmology? What they know about the space? What do you think they know about the space? Tell me.
What do I know about space?
1400 years
There's a
ago.
lot of it.
Listen. 1400 years ago, what do you think their knowledge about the space? Yeah? Please, brother, please.
Just ignore. Just
What do you think? What they know about the space? They have only they see the stars, nothing else. So, for example, 1400 years ago, there is one of the chapters of the Quran talking about the details about the positions of the stars, where God says, making an oath by the positions of the stars, and God says to us in the Quran, and it is a great oath, but you are not yet aware of that. So at that time, the Muslims or the people, they say it's from God. We don't know what's the meaning of positions of the stars. They say, this is the star position there and there. But only recently, when they exposed the cosmology, and they discovered the space, they know when you look to the sky in the night, what you see is that you don't see exactly the star. You see the history. So because when the light travels from the star, and it takes millions of years until it reaches your
the
eyes.
star is no longer there.
That star is not no longer there.
In the
It's
position
what
that you see.
is the position of that star when the light departed from it. Who taught Muhammad about this? Was it another good guess?
Astronomy would describe the Quran.
So you can bring in examples like this after example after example,
and more examples.
and then you'll have to say, what is the limit of guesswork? Because if somebody gets all of this right rather than getting it wrong,
Okay, let's cut this short here. Right? So you guys live in London. Yeah, have you lived in London all your lives? Yeah. You see this wonderful city. I don't live in London, right? But we're Londoners. You're Londoners, yeah. I'm not. You see this wonderful city, the way it's organised, the way it's built, the way it runs.
Yeah.
You see the way. Do you think that it got to this place that it's in now by people following spiritual ideas and concepts rather than scientific ideas and concepts? Answer me that.
No, Islam answered this. Islam answered this again 1400 years ago. God told us in the Quran.
No, I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
I don't know about the Quran.
No, you'll
I
appreciate-
want you to tell me.
I am answering you.
Did London get to the position it's in now by people actually making scientific discoveries, or by following spiritual beliefs?
Okay, God told
One
us
or the other.
again.
One or
God
the other.
told
No,
us
I want you to tell me. Things like the tune and electricity.
Listen.
And the lights and the buildings,
Okay,
and the
listen.
transport.
Listen, God told us in the Quran that He is the one who created you and made you to be successor on earth, to build the earth. Meaning that God, when He created us as well, part of our mission, which is part of our mission in worshipping Him, and as well to build the earth, and as well to establish these cities, to establish these things, to facilitate things, to make the life easy for the people. And that's why, for example, Islam was the time where the most experienced scientists, they used to not able to live in London, as you say. Yeah, they used to run away from London and other countries because they were tortured if they say there is a gravity. So they had to go to a Muslim country like Galileo and others. When he talks about like what's his name, Newton and Galileo, when they say, oh, there is a gravity, that literally it was established for him saying blasphemy. You cannot talk about the gravity. You cannot talk about these things. Where in the time where Islam at that time allowing scientists to come and explore all their science, explore their mind in a freedom of environment, which is a freedom to think and have the freedom to bring idea and to bring what is best for the betterment of the humanity. At that time, when those people when they separate the religion, because they found the religion that doesn't go along with the scientific methods. That's why they say they become the secular system. But in Islam, it wasn't the case. Islam within the Islamic system, allowing scientists to develop, allowing scientists to explore their ideas and to bring what is best for the better of the humanity.
It's got scientific
They have
facts
done
in the
that.
Quran. It's got scientific
Understand?
facts. The Holy Book with scientific facts.
So we agree with you that the scientific progress has made London as it is now. But if you look at what's behind the scientific progress is understanding the scientific methodology, reason, observation, and so on. This was driven by Islamic civilization. Renaissance would not happen in Europe unless and if they did not come into contact with Islamic civilization. When the Queen of England didn't have a bath for a month at one point, in Islamic Spain, there were underground sewage system, overground lighting system. That's how developed scientifically and technologically they were. Because why? Islam encouraged. We're talking about during the times. Spain.
Finish.
Give me a minute. Bear with me. So when you study the history of Cordoba and Andalus, you'll realize at that time the technological advancement was such that people from England, the Lord of Bath, had to send his son. And he comes back and sets up, if I'm not mistaken, Cambridge University.
Yeah.
The universities were modeled under the universities within the Islamic world.
Oh, look, I don't doubt that.
Yeah, so that's why
Islamic history is fantastic.
Islam never discouraged people to study science and the reality of our world.
Progress on education, yeah. You see, listen, guys, I've got to go. It's been very nice talking to you.
Take care. Look after your family.
I want to go over here and listen to what this guy says.
Sure.
Okay, take care.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. So it's a pleasure having you in the park once again and having a discussion. I think the discussion we had was quite interesting for several reasons. One is when you have people who have, unfortunately, because of their not having being exposed to Islam, their assumptions about what Islam is, what Islam teaches, and so on and so forth, one thing. Other thing about how do we know what is true? How do you know something exists or not? We had a discussion. So we can summarize, you can summarize for us. And some of the things that we brought into discussion, I think we need to expand a bit so that people can appreciate further, because he was in a rush to go, the gentleman.
Yes.
But let's just expand a little bit more. But firstly, what is happening with the people's understanding of other people's faith and their religion? Why do you think people have this misunderstanding of the other? Is it mainly because of their not being exposed to the information, or there's something else that's driving that misinformation or ignorance of other people's faith, specifically the faith of Islam and our particular things that we were discussing?
Now we need to understand a few things. Now, many of the people living in the Western countries, because they were exposed to the Christianity, for example, in the past, and actually because of the dictatorship of the popes of that time, so they used to dictate what is exactly right and what's wrong and what's right for them. So they used to dictate today something is right, tomorrow is wrong, and vice versa. And we could see now in Vatican the same thing applies until today. So, for example, without giving the details, so for example, homosexuality before it was something which is wrong, and now things are introduced to something which is right. That's their belief system, and at the end of the day, it's their choices to do that. But at the same time, due to these understanding, the people, they are fed up from following the faith, because at the end of the day it was kind of an obstructive for them to explore the science, and that's what made many of them believed in secular system, because they said that religion is not relevant to the things, and that's what he was talking about today.
We're going to just go to on this side here. It's too much of a noise. Yeah. Correct. Or here. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah. Tafadhal, carry on.
So that's why what many people, because the clash that they had with the religion, that's why they came to the choice to say, all religions are the same. So that's why he was talking about. He said that London was developed because of religion or because of the science and engineers, etc. Because here again, those people, they were the dictatorship that they had through these popes and other things. They didn't allow people to explore their mind, and as well to facilitate. There is no they didn't have kind of facilities for them to develop in their science, etc. Before, until they came what we call it the science revolution, you could say, and people they start believing in the secular system. That's the only way to move forward. And it was that because of the religion, because their religion is kind of solid, and you cannot choose something except what the Pope agrees, and if the Pope didn't agree, that means they cannot choose it. So that's one thing, and that's why they become many of the people, they become judgmental to all religions. They say all religions are the same. But because of as they say, if you are ignorant, the people generally, if they are ignorant about something, they kind of take enmity towards it, because they are not exposed to Islam, and they don't understand that Islam, that it has the Quran, and the Quran is not a science book, but it has scientific facts. And then it's subhanAllah, it's mind-blowing. When you see, for example, these facts, Allah Azza wa Jalla, we're not talking about theories, we're talking about facts mentioned in the Quran.
So we'll come to this example, inshallah.
Yes.
So just to bringing in the reason I asked you, it is actually there's a history within Europe
Yes.
in which, because of the suppression of their intellectual
Yes.
inquiry,
Yes.
that's what prompted a lot of people to think that religion obstructs people
Yes.
from using their minds freely and liberally and critically.
Yes.
And they assume
Islam.
same for all the other religions. They
Yes,
assume same that okay, every other religion is likewise, and that's why they're not charitable enough to give the second look to Islam, for example,
Exactly.
and to say okay, Islam may be something different.
Yes,
They
exactly.
see all within the same light.
Yeah,
in
they
the sense.
see all
So
of the same.
the ignorance is compounded by this historical reality of theirs,
Yes.
and perhaps this is one of the reasons why they don't want to learn even further, even within this age of information. Right. So when we talked about
There is another thing as well. There is as well, yes, we blame, for example, the systems that they had, and we blame all of these things that they were going through. At the same time as well, we should as well talk about our shortcoming. As Muslims, we used to be leading the humanity in science. We used to be leading the humanity in mathematics. We used to be leading the humanity in all of these sciences. And when we lacked, then people they came forward. Those people who try to segregate between religion and science, and then they end up by atheism, and they end up by secularism, etc. And that's why they become kind of leading the humanity now. Instead of the Muslims, they should take the lead actually. Now what they have done, because we left the position empty to them, and that's why they came, and then they start to say, you know what, there is no God, and then they start bringing this atheism systems to the science, and atheism ideas to the science, in order to say to avoid and neglect that anything related to God in the science aspects, because of us. That's something which is we have as well to condemn this as well as Muslims, to know, because we lacked in this, and that's why things happen.
Sure. We don't just blame the others. We are ourselves
Blameworthy.
at guilt and to be blamed as well.
Yeah.
Jazakallahu khairan. The other point that we talked about is epistemology. How do we know? What is the sources of knowledge? How can we know and be certain about things? The gentleman thought that you have to really see things to believe in it. And the examples we were providing is about the soul, about the existence of their own brains, things like this. So the point that we highlighted, that you don't have to see things to believe, oftentimes, in fact, this is a valid ways of knowing things, is by having information through a trustworthy witness or a source.
Yes.
So in this case, we talked about how Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave information of the unseen, having had this knowledge from the Creator himself.
Yes.
And then we moved on to talk about a few examples. Now let's elaborate a bit more of those examples you talked about. You talked about the darknesses within the deep oceans. At one point, there's pitch black darkness. Yes. And there are layers of this darkness, because that's how the Quran says,
Yes.
okay, layers. Do you mind explaining a bit more where does this occur in the Quran? Do you remember which particular ayah?
Now here, what Allah Azza wa Jalla, now before we come to this, as you said, we need to have a trustworthy source. And this trustworthy source, firstly, there are the scholars of Islam, they said we put conditions. Firstly, that this source is saying the truth, and it was experienced with the truth. That's one thing. The other thing, salamat al-qasd, meaning the goodwill or the good intention for it. So that's why that when we are talking about the Quran, we know that Allah has a goodwill for the guidance of the people. Meaning, as we know that God is good, as we believe as Muslims, and Allah is good and wanted the goodness for us and wanted the guidance for us. So Allah has a goodwill for us. That's one of the things. And as well, the experience of knowing the truth. For example, that when Allah has sent Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, He has sent him with the true faith, alayhi salatu wasalam. And as well, he was, before the revelation came to him, he was known that he is a Sadiq al-Amin, he is the trustworthy one, he is the truthful person. Before revelation came to him, and this testimony from his enemies who came later on, became later on his enemies, who didn't believe in him, they still consider him a trustworthy person. They still consider him as someone who's truthful, alayhi salatu wasalam, even the way they took the enmity of him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, moving on, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came with a message from Allah Azza, came to the people saying to them that I was sent by Allah Azza. And for every messenger and prophet of Allah, I will send proof and evidence to show that he is saying the truth. So the proof that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he came with the Quran. Now the Quran is so sophisticated in its language that even it was a miracle for the Arabs of his time. When they were hearing the Quran, they testify in the favor of the Quran, saying that the Quran, there is nothing like it. There is no more sweet word than it. There is no better words than it. But now, and even though I'm talking about people like Al-Walid ibn Mughira, who didn't believe in the Quran, when he testified about the Quran, he said, "Inna lahu la-halawa wa inna alayhi la-talawa." It is something that is so sweet, so great, and it is something that it is ya'lu wa la yu'la alayhi. It is above everything, nothing can compare to it. So he was describing the Quran in a way that even a Muslim cannot describe it in this way. And even though this person, he died, and they said to him, what is the way that we can describe Muhammad? They said, can we say he's a soothsayer? He said, no, I'm the most knowledgeable person about the soothsayer. He's not a magician. He's not a poet. He's not like. He said the only way to say we can say he's a magician, because with these words it will separate the son from the father. That's what he is. The closest thing that according to his interpretation. Now after 1400 years ago, now we are talking about vast majority of the human on earth that they don't speak Arabic. How they can appreciate the Quran? How they can know that the Quran came from God? Can we say to them, okay, it's best for them to go into the language of the Quran to understand that it's so great language. But in the same time, when Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed the Quran, as well, Allah knew Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, there's going to be a time people are going to appreciate the science. There's going to be a time people are going to appreciate history. There's going to be a time people are going to appreciate different things. So Allah as well has sent science. Quran is not a history book, but it has history. Quran is not science book, but it has scientific facts. And all of these things. Quran is not a book of poetry and others, but it has as well, it's so sophisticated in its language. So all these things are in the Quran. So part of it, Allah has mentioned, for example, in the Quran, Allah stated in the Quran that those who are away from the guidance of Allah, that they are like someone who's deep in the bottom of the ocean. Above him there is a wave, above the wave there is another wave. Above the sea there is a cloud. Even if he took his hand out of his pocket, he will be not able to see it. Darkness upon darkness. So God is talking about certain darkness. So this darkness which is compound darkness, pitch dark. Now 1400 years ago, anyone, even the people nowadays, no one can dive more than 20 meters or 30 meters or whatever. They cannot dive more than this. They don't have the equipment to dive, to go into the sea and to see what's going on there.
Yeah.
They know there's deep in the sea, there is no depth. There's some places are deep in the sea, but they don't know what's the depth of the sea. They couldn't understand how far they can dive because they don't have the equipment. Until recently, they discovered when they have the submarines and equipment to dive, and then when they start diving deep in the oceans, and then they discovered at that time, recent or before, in the past, people used to appreciate the surface of the sea waves. Yeah. What do you call it? The surface waves. Yeah, of the sea. So they used to appreciate. They say we know that's waves, but they never thought in the history or any scientific book that there are waves in the bottom of the sea going in another direction. Yeah. So when they dive, and then they start discovering the sea, they discovered there's something called the sea current, and the sea current not necessarily go in the flow with the surface waves. They could go in another direction.
Exactly.
And they travel with waves. So it's waves. So Allah described it, موج يغشاه موج من فوقه موج من فوقه سحاب. Yeah. So Allah said mawj means waves. Above it there is another wave. Above that there is a sahab, there is a cloud. Yeah. So here is talking about two waves here. So when they dived in the sea, they found there is another wave going in another direction. Yeah.
If you excuse me for a second, can you, Bismillah? Yeah. Yeah. To continue.
Okay, to continue. But Allah has mentioned in Surah An-Nur. Yeah. In this Surah An-Nur in verse number 40, Allah is describing about the disbeliever, talking about them. Allah says in the Quran about them, أو كظلمات في بحر الرجي, or a darkness in a deep sea, in a deep ocean. يغشاه موج من فوقه موج من فوقه سحاب. That above it there is waves, above the wave there is another wave, above that there is a cloud. ظلمات بعضها فوق بعض. Darkness upon darkness. Yeah. Now here Allah Adra said here, إذا أخرج يده لم يكد يراها. If he take his hand, he barely is able to see it. He cannot even see it. Yeah. And then Allah Adra has said in the Quran, ومن لم يجعل الله له نورا فما له من نور. If Allah didn't show light to someone, he will have no light. So look at this. The surah is Surah An-Nur, the chapter of the light. And it's talking about people who are away from the guidance of Allah. It's so profound, subhanAllah, this verse. So Allah Adra here is describing like a pitch dark, someone who's deep in the bottom of the ocean. Above him there is a wave, which is, as I said to you, we described before, which is in the past people used to appreciate the surface waves. But underneath that there is another wave, which is they call it the sea current, going could be in a different direction. Yeah. So there is a wave, and above that there is a wave, which is the sea, for example, the surface waves, and above that there is a cloud. Now, recently when they discovered, when there is a cloud weather, like for example today, like more than 40% and more of the sunlight will be reflected back on only barely 60% or 50% will go through. Yeah?
The deeper that you go.
Yeah. Now before that, now this is only the wave. Now when there is a sea and that sea has waves on the surface, then these waves will break the light. Yeah. And if it breaks the light, half of it will be able to go through, and what remains, there is another wave going in another direction, will break what remains. And deep in the bottom of the ocean, that's pitch dark. And only recently when they went and they did these submarines, and they discovered like there are some creatures that they live in the bottom of the ocean that they never saw the sunlight. They don't have eyes. Some of these fishes and some of these crabs, they don't have eyes. Exactly. Because they don't need, there is no light, the absence of the light. So Allah Azza is saying about these things, and Allah is talking about those who are away from the guidance of Allah. Even if he took his hand out of his pocket, look like this to his hand, لم يكد يراها. So the description, لم يكد, he's barely not able to see. That they could be, but barely not able to see. Yeah. Who taught Muhammad 1400 years ago about these facts? Where he didn't live by the sea. Someone could say because maybe he traveled, he saw the sea. Okay, fine. But who went and dived in the sea and give this description? There is no one in the history, anyone who talk about this description of the darkness of the sea. It's only in the Quran. Now this is a question. Who taught Muhammad about this fact? And it's a fact. Who taught him about it? He was saying it could be a good guess. Salam. Okay, another guess.
Yeah.
God is talking about, for example, Allah says in the Quran, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسْمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. I will not make an oath by the positions of the star, and it is a great oath. Yeah, you are not yet aware of that. Now again, see this how Allah has described this. Generally, when Allah is making an oath by something in the Quran, that means something you need to ponder, you need to think about it. It's something great. You should consider it. Allah says in the Quran, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. I will not make an oath by the position of the stars. Meaning, it is something great. It is something precious. But at that time, you're not yet aware of that. People in the past, when they used to see the stars, they say this is the position, the star, the north star, etc. This is the direction and all. That's all what they know about the stars. Some they have further information, but they don't have much information until recently they discovered the cosmology, and then they discovered, and the science was developed, and then they start knowing more about the space. And then they discovered that what you see in the night is literally the history. You're not seeing the star now. Why? Because when the sun, when these stars, the light of the stars departed from these stars, and it takes millions of years in the space, millions of years, until it reaches our eyes. Meaning, at the time when the light reaches our eyes, what happened to that star? It's either it's not there anymore because we know the universe is expanding, and another Allah has talked about the expansion of the universe. Yeah. So that because of the expansion, so the stars they move. So it's not there. So what it is the position of that star.
The star has already moved away from that position.
From that position, definitely, that's not there. Or it could be that star already vanished, become a black hole, because they have a time, they die, and they turn into black holes. Meaning that what you see in the night when you look into the space, look into the sky, is literally you see the history. You see it. You see millions of years ago. Now, who taught Muhammad about these things? How did he know sallallahu alaihi wasallam about it? And there are many places in the Quran talks about these scientific facts, and talks about the layers of the earth. Talks about, for example, the fetus in the womb
various
of the
others.
mother, and many others.
Yeah. So these are the things what we just highlighted to explain to you to understand how amazing these information the Quran provided for people to reflect on. Because if you really want evidence and proof to believe in the Quran being a divine revelation, to believe in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be a prophet or a messenger of God, these are the things that you can reflect on and ask yourself, how would he have known this information? Because this information you cannot just know by yourself, by guesswork, and there's a limit to guesswork. I mean, this is something, and statistically, if you were to talk about it, if you have about 20 situations to get them all of them right, it's like 1 in a million chance. If you times half, times half.
Just one thing. Think about the details. You're talking about. You're not talking about just a guess. You're talking about detailed guess, which means all these guesses together.
Exactly.
Yeah? All these guesses. For example, the waves, for example, of the sea. So the guess there's another wave. The guess the darkness. The guess of all of these things. The guess of taking your hand, you're barely unable to see. All of these guesses together.
Exactly.
And as well, we're talking about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was illiterate. He was unable to have the access of the knowledge of his time, let alone the knowledge that yet to come in the future. There is another thing. For example, historical facts. Now, when we are talking about the Quran, we need to understand that we only talk about facts, not theories. We have to bring facts. We have to say it's facts, or not something. There is a meaning that it was agreed upon that it is a fact. Not like to say it's a fact that the sun rises from the east. That's fact. So the same thing. Yeah, it has to be in the same standard. Now, for example, one historical fact. Yeah, and in the past, the Christian and the Jews used to take a mick of the Muslims. They used to say, your Quran has mistakes. Why? Because it has historical error. Why? What's the historical error? They said, okay, throughout the Quran, when you read the Quran, you'll find constantly, that when Allah addresses the king of the time of Moses, always saying, Pharaoh again, Pharaoh, Moses and Pharaoh, all the time. But when it comes to Joseph, where they live in the same land, Yusuf alayhi salam, talking about the same land, Egypt, and when God addresses the king of that time, they will say king. So they say your Quran has issues, has error. And we Muslims, alhamdulillah, because we believe in Allah, we say if it came from Allah, we know it's the truth. Yeah. No one knows in the history, the only source of information about the kings and at that time was the Torah and the Gospel. Yeah, that's the only source to know about what happened in the history. That's the only source in terms of historical sources. The Quran introduced something new to them to say that that's a king and this is Pharaoh. Now later on, when an Englishman from this country and went and found what we call the Rosetta Stone, and then they dismantled all of the hieroglyphic languages, the ancient Egyptian one, to old Greek language, to the Latin language. And then they discovered that it is impossible during the time of Joseph that the king of his time to be called Pharaoh. Is impossible. Why? Because the Hyksos rules at that time, and the Hyksos they used to take kings. They never called pharaohs. And in fact, later on the title Pharaoh was introduced to the palace of the king, and then later on it was developed to be the title for the king. So it is impossible to say that the king of the time of Joseph was Pharaoh, where the Torah is talking about Pharaoh, the Gospel is talking about Pharaoh. So who was right?
So two things then. Those people who say the Quran copied from the Bible, why did the Quran not copy the mistake of the Bible?
Exactly.
And how was the Quran able to produce or make this information. I mean, how did the Quran or the author of the Quran, or if it's Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if they were wondering, how did he know? So let's leave these points of reflection for people to reflect on, because it's only when you deeply reflect on the Quran you will see the truth, being deciphered. The truth comes out manifest, clear, and people who have sincere heart will see the truth. And we leave you to reflect on, so that those of you who are not Muslims yet, God guides you to the truth of Islam. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.